Hey, I'm Kevin Gutwein, and this is The Journey. Today, I have the pleasure of getting to talk with Betty Nelson. And Betty is one of the most energetic, passionate, and generous people that I know. I've had the opportunity to get to know her over lots of years. And today, I get to sit down and kind of share her story. So, just as a way of a short introduction, you'll learn a lot more about her soon. But Betty has really spent her life, and certainly she spent her career, making an impact at Purdue University and in her community. And so that didn't stop when she retired. It continued to this day. And I know, knowing her, I know she has other plans for the future. So I'm excited to have this conversation with Betty today. And Betty, we've known each other for a long time. We've had a lot of fun conversations over the years. Thanks for agreeing to join me today on the Journey podcast.
Happy to do that. And I think sometimes we get so busy talking about our lives when we meet that we almost forget the business that we need to take care of.
Yes.
Evidence of a nice relationship.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it has been. It's really fun. And yeah, no, then that's scrambling at the end of the meeting. You say, hey, we need to talk about this.
Right. We only have this much time and let's get going.
Exactly. Well, today we're going to kind of really just try to dig in a little bit to the name of this podcast. Really is The Journey for a reason, because I'm talking to successful people. And that success is not measured just monetarily or by a certain aspect of those people's life, but by a holistic, fulfilling life. And so I've seen that in you, and I've gotten to learn some about you. And so today, I just really want to start from the beginning to have you share a little bit about what your childhood was like, what some of those early years were like that kind of formed who Betty Nelson was during your career and who you are today. I think it started in West Virginia, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about that and share kind of some of your memories and a little bit about your family, and just kind of start wherever you want.
Well, it did start in West Virginia, and never imagined that I would end up spending most of my life in Indiana. You know, Indiana.
It's a dream of everyone, right?
Well, yeah, and I didn't even know where it was. I could not have pointed out on a map where Indiana is. But this has been a really good place to land. Mm-hmm. So don't want to diminish that in any way. West Virginia Bluefield was a really good place to grow up. Mm-hmm. Bluefield is in a valley between mountains, and the story goes that it was named Bluefield because as the early settlers came over the mountain and they looked down into that valley, chicory was in bloom.
Oh, wow.
And, it was just a glen of blue fields.
Gorgeous.
And, still an abundance of chicory, wild chicory in that area. But, I think beyond just it being an attractive place, that was a time when the kids in the neighborhood just went out and played, bring out the bicycles and the skates and the tin cans, and you could play freely and let your imagination take you into new games. It was a fine time to be. And parents had a very nice relationship. Our family was comfortable, but certainly not wealthy.
Sure.
I never worried that there would be food on the table for meals. My mother was a marvelous cook. My father was city manager, and so I feel privileged to have been with that group of people. And hard work was important. functioning with integrity. If you start something, you finish it. And I used to get really kind of annoyed with my mother because I'd have a date and I thought a better opportunity came along, and so I wanted to cancel, the first one. And boy, my family would have none of that. You have made a commitment, you said yes, and that is what you will do. So there was a lot of reinforcement for ethical behavior, however that was applied.
Well, that's something we've never talked about. How many dates did you have when you were in high school? It sounds like you had a lot more opportunities than I did.
I didn't have a whole lot. I was so shy.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, God. I was so shy. I was raised, you speak when spoken to.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a lot of experience. But, there are times you just have to have a date if you're going to go to a prom or, there's a special event in town.
Yep.
And anyway, I learned appropriate responses from my parents about how you handle things like that.
You mentioned hard work. Do you have any examples or memories of that kind of stick out to you about, because you're still an extremely hard worker, and so that was obviously ingrained in you. And I think it's one of the areas that I've noticed in successful people that hard work is always in there. Sometimes they're very, very smart. They're the smartest kid in their class, but a lot of times,
I wasn't.
A lot of times not, right?
Yeah.
But that hard work is always a component of that. Do you remember anything specifically that kind of stuck out to you from those years?
Well, my father was a very hard worker. City work. It was 24/7, 365. And so he was always taking calls. And I can remember my mother just being so irritated because she'd fix this lovely dinner.
Oh.
And we were in the middle of dinner. The phone would ring. And that was not an option for my father. Of course, he would take a call. Yep. And
she would look at me like, "Here we go again."
Right, right. I don't know what happened when I wasn't around discussing that, but so that was very evident. When my father came home from work, he would change clothes and he would go to the garden, and he would maybe work an hour in the garden before dinner, then come in, clean up, change clothes again, and have dinner. So he was project oriented. He was the treasurer for the church for years and years and years. Mm-hmm. And we'd come home from church with the money, and he would while Mother was finishing dinner, he would go to the desk and begin to count the money. And it was just, I think the message was really clear that being useless is about the worst thing you can do. Yeah. You have a purpose. An aunt had some what I thought were unfortunate life experiences, so periodically she would stay with my family for about a month. Okay. And every day, she would get the dust cloths and she would go around and dust everything. And she wanted the family to save up all the socks with holes so she could darn while she was there. And this was never articulated, but I think the message was, if I'm here sharing your hospitality, then I need to be contributing something to the household.
Maybe I should have you have that conversation with my kids.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
They actually do pretty good. But there's times where you're like, you're in this house and your usefulness is not showing up, right?
Kevin, when my mother would say to me, "Betty, I am not running a hotel. I knew I was in some trouble.
Yeah.
And that I had not followed through on some responsibility
Sure.
that you do in this household. But I knew, I'm not running a hotel. And I say that to Dick from time to time, which he loves, of course. But I think, it's important to know that we're all in this together.
Yep, for sure.
And I'll do these things, and you're responsible for doing that.
And you learn that, if you're learning that in your home, that carries out to when you go to college, it carries to your community. And when you're in a space, you have a responsibility to pick up that piece of trash or whatever it is,
yes.
And that carries on beyond the home, right?
Absolutely. And, one of the, when I was in elementary school, the Second World War was in process. And so we were, the elementary school children were collecting tin cans for the war effort.
Yeah.
Well, if we're going to collect tin cans, our class is going to be the best. So we're going to beat Ramsey and Wade and Fairview. So,
were those the other schools around you, or
right? Those were some other schools.
And you still remember the names of those schools? And
sure.
And were you the ringleader in making sure that your school won, or were you just part of contributing to that?
I think I was just part of. We're going to go collect from all the neighbors.
Yeah.
All their tin cans because we want the most. So I think this being useful somehow also translated over into a level of competition. If we're going to do it,
sure,
we're going to do it really well.
We're going to win.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. I love that. And that's another thing, right? People who are successful, obviously can take competition to an extreme where, you're always comparing yourself to other people, and that's just not healthy. But there's this level of competitiveness that you see in people who have who have really accomplished some things, and there's some good things about that. So,
but you can also make a game out of it. Then it's fun.
Yes.
Come on, let's.
Yeah, and then you had to team up to win together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't know if I really made the connection that World War II was going on when you were in school. So was that? How in front of you was that? Like, did you feel disconnected at all because it wasn't happening, here, or were you like very aware of what was going on?
Well, I don't think
the news was different then, right?
I don't think I understood exactly, but my brother, as soon as he graduated from high school, in fact, he'd gotten an induction notice toward the end of his senior year.
Really?
And they were able to get a postponement so that he could graduate.
Okay.
So, almost as soon as he, walked down the steps off the stage, he was to report for a physical in Charleston, 10 years older than I. So, I didn't understand all of this, but I knew my family, my parents were really upset about it.
Sure.
Very anxious.
You could feel the tension probably.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So, throughout that whole period, there was a focus on what's the day's news. After dinner, my mother and I and that aunt would be in the kitchen cleaning up, and the big thing was to have the radio on to listen to H.V. Kaltenborn give the day's news. I mean, that was just the ritual.
Yeah.
Because that's how you somehow found out where my brother might be or what the action was in that area. It
wasn't just news that mattered. I mean, it was
exactly.
It had big repercussions for your life and what things might look like.
That's right. And one of the most disappointing happenings in elementary school, I think the war was over, or I don't know exactly the juncture, but my brother was coming home on furlough. And I was in 5th or 6th grade. I had Mrs. Peck was the teacher for both of those for me. My brother was coming in on furlough the next morning, and family's so excited because he's coming home after all this time. And so, with great pride, I announced to Mrs. Peck and the classroom that I would not be in school the next morning because I was going with my family to the train. Norfolk and Western came through our town. I was going to meet my brother. Well, she did not like that at all. She did not think I should skip school. I don't know what word she used, but she was not happy.
That's seared into your memory, isn't it?
It is. I was just taken aback. How could somebody who worked with youth, somebody who knew there was a war and knew that everybody didn't come home, how could that person not be as excited about this as I was?
Wow.
I didn't care. They could have told me you can never come back to school again.
Yep.
I was going with my family to meet my brother.
Totally.
That's the first time I can recall, kind of getting my back straight and digging in my heels.
Mm-hmm.
And
it wasn't the last time knowing you.
It was not the last time. But here's this big important adult who's the teacher and the principal of the school, and there are just some things where you...
And they responded that way.
That's right.
And when this is skipping way ahead, but when you were at Purdue then and you were in a leadership position, did things like that stick with you, the way that you handled students and your staff and things like that when they had things come up in their life?
Yeah, I think, that didn't happen very often. That's not my general mode. But for family or significant people in my life, there's just no debate about what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And that doesn't always make you the most popular person around.
Right.
They're there.
Right. Yeah.
And she's little, she's skinny, and she speaks softly. So, and that's kind of what happened, Kevin, at that episode 3 years ago when the university announced it was going to put the new gateway in. Mm-hmm.
Could you expand on that story a little bit? Because I think that it ties in really well to kind of some of the things that that kind of formed who you are, and it kind of culminated a little bit in that just a few years ago, real recently.
Yeah,
so.
very, very recently.
Yeah.
The university, master plan for this next 50 years of the university, one of the pieces was a new gateway, an entryway to the university. And the designated spot for that is the corner of State Street and Grant, and which is a marvelous place for the gateway. Yeah. It gets lots of attention by everybody who approaches the university. But the university members who were planning that did not check the university history. And there was already a marker at that corner that in 1984, the Purdue Panhellenic Association gave the money and collaborated with the university in planning a marker there that said Purdue University, 1869, both sides. And that was dedicated to Dean Beverly Stone, who at that point was Dean of Students, but in years past had been advisor to Panhellenic.
There was also a mentor and friend of yours.
Absolutely. She was one of my mentors. So the university announces publicly that this marker is going to come down. One of the planners had called it underwhelming. So they were going to take it down and put in the big gateway. And certainly the university could do that, but that space had already been dedicated.
Yep.
And no communication had gone to the students in Panhellenic. There'd been no communication with any of us who were colleagues and friends of Beverly Stone. Her family had not been notified of this change.
Yeah.
So, it was just one of those junctures when,
somebody needed to raise their hand.
Somebody needed to say, we have a history here. And I think of special interest at that announcement about the master plan, the big picture of the master plan, which is pretty exciting. The person who is head of the organization that did the planning said at a number of points during his comments that the most important thing he had learned over 20 years of working in this business is that culture trumps strategy. Culture trumps strategy. And here we are with a perfect example of having forgotten our culture.
Yep. Because of the strategy.
Because of the strategy.
Yeah.
So he's saying all of this without knowing the background of that marker.
Yeah. And you went and rallied some troops, from what I remember, and got some things adjusted. And I think there ended up being a compromise on that, right?
Absolutely. There's now a new plaque on one of the pillars of that entryway. Yeah. And it's very nicely done. And last March, just ahead of the shutdown, the university helped plan a lovely luncheon for members of Panhellenic, old members and new members, and friends of Beverly's. Yeah. So we got all of that done just in time.
Kind of
the archivist brought over a beautiful display of things that represented Bev Stone. And because the students had earned, through several years of plant sales, the money to buy that marker.
Sure.
The plant sale theme was used in that luncheon. So some of the plants you see here were takeaways from that luncheon.
That's awesome.
It was just, it was so nicely done.
Yes.
Folks in development really worked hard to try to mend some fences there.
Well, and you worked hard to bring awareness to it and bring attention to it and get things right. And I think that's, and you had other people that were helping to do that too. But I think that's what I've really appreciated about you over the years is that desire to do the right thing. And even if it's difficult or if it's going to ruffle some feathers, right? A few feathers get ruffled along the way, but you're willing to do that. And I want to go back a little bit then, because that's a great tie-in to kind of how you became who you are. But if we go back a little bit past your childhood area, and there may be some more stories from that, but you went to an all-women's college. And I remember you telling me you felt like you really grew a lot there because it was other women. There wasn't a structure that would have made you maybe not share your voice and things like that. It just gave you a lot more freedom to do that, and you really grew a lot during those 4 years.
Enormously.
Yeah.
And I went to that because my father died when I was in high school. And so my mother had never worked outside the home, so finances were pretty strained. And nobody said, we only have this many dollars. But, it was clear that
Right.
my mother began taking in boarders.
Oh, yeah, I remember you telling me that.
So we had some people renting rooms, and she would prepare the evening meal. So very resourceful. She knew the talent she had that she could use to generate some funds.
Your life changed a lot at that moment.
Right. I learned a lot at that point.
Wow.
So I knew I needed to go to a college that wasn't very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't finding the best fit for me, or who has the academic program I'm going to love, and where can I get a job, and all of that. It was where can I afford to go.
Sure.
So I picked a state school, and it turned out to be a women's college, and at that point it was attached to Virginia Tech, okay. And that had some pluses. But it was a perfect place for me at that time to learn, to have leadership opportunities, and to have opportunities to influence, and just find out what I could do.
Yeah.
And not be distracted by the whole dating thing.
Yep.
It was not a place that was big on sororities.
Mm-hmm.
We had sororities, but they were little chapter rooms that were not very fine. So I really just kind of focused on getting into everything and doing as much as I could, and having a good time with that, and meeting a lot of people and making friends. And
that's awesome.
I used that experience to the max.
And I think that because that was such a good experience, I think it's not surprising that when you were working for Purdue, one of your big goals was to have the students have a great experience.
Yes.
During their college years, right?
Absolutely.
And then you went to grad school.
I did.
Right? And so what went into that decision? What was your plan when you went to grad school?
Oh, that is such a compliment. To think I had plans for all of that, Kevin. Gosh, I didn't even...
I was just kind of guessing. I didn't really know if you had plans or not, but I thought, well, I'll give it a try.
Well, once I got there, I did. But I didn't know...
Excuse me.
I didn't know females went to grad school. I didn't know any women who'd gone to grad school.
Interesting.
I grew up with the women models around me had been executive secretaries, they'd been teachers, clerks in nice stores.
Sure.
So I didn't have any women models for
grad school.
For not even, well...
Or for other kinds of jobs.
I just didn't know what was out there.
Makes
so, sense. But because I was competitive, I knew I wanted really good grades, and I knew what I was enjoying. And I had to, one summer I had to take courses at a small college near Bluefield.
Okay.
And at the end of one of those courses, the instructor asked, was I thinking about graduate school? And, I was too embarrassed to say, well, no, I don't know. I don't know anything about.
If they're asking, maybe they think I should, right?
Yeah, that was that was the compliment that came from that.
Yeah.
So I said yes, and knew nothing, but I just couldn't say.
Couldn't say no.
I don't know what you're talking about.
That's amazing.
But that was really the genesis of going on to school.
Really?
And then I read in a sorority magazine a half-page ad for Ohio University and a master's program they offered in student personnel administration.
Okay.
And click.
Boom. That's what you did.
If I can go to graduate school and just keep on doing all the fun things I'm doing in undergraduate school, I never have to grow up.
Was money a concern at that point to go to grad school, or were you going to be able to like do some graduate assistant and get a lot of it paid for?
Yeah, and this offered a graduate stipend.
Okay.
So I'd have my own money.
Wow. Awesome. Now you met somebody there, is my understanding, your husband.
We were in a class.
Eventually at
together.
Ohio University.
Right. Uh-huh.
Okay.
But I think I'd gotten my sea legs in undergraduate. I think I had seen enough women as I was growing up who had thought there was going to be a Prince Charming, and they that would take care of their life plan.
Yeah.
And it turned out poorly.
Yes.
And then I read Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
And was inspired by Scarlett. And, you know, like she says, I will never be hungry again.
Yep.
So added on to that, these models of women who had not, who didn't have lots of options. And you add Scarlett, and then a women's college.
Yeah.
Is you know, my sail was set.
Yep.
Fairly well by that time. And I had a marvelous social life in graduate school. You know, I had 2 dates a night sometimes, you know.
Are you serious?
It crossed my heart, yeah. You know, I hadn't dated a lot when I was in undergraduate school, so, you know, it was time to...
You were competitive. Like, hey, I'm getting 2 dates tonight. What about you?
Yeah, right. What are you doing?
That's awesome.
So it was a fun time and a really good time. Okay. And Dick and I were in a class together, and you know, had good experiences. So we were married a year after I completed the master's degree.
Okay.
And he was in a PhD program at that point. And again, met marvelous people. I was so fortunate, Kevin, to have good mentors, remarkable mentors all along the way. You know, the speech teacher in high school. You know, I did a lot of extemporaneous speaking competitively, which just, you know, was always a shock to me to do well at that. And Mrs. Dean said to me at one point, "Now, Betty, just don't say get and fur, and you'll do fine."
That is funny.
So I try very hard when I'm doing public speaking not to say get and fur.
I've got some of that from northern Indiana too, where I grew up. So Warsh. Yeah.
And people label you right now.
Oh yeah, you're done. Boom.
Yeah. Don't you get it?
That is funny. So you get married a year out of school, but how did you end up at Purdue? And share a little bit about your career there. I know there's no way for us in the time that we have to capture all that you did in your career there.
You wouldn't want to know.
But just a little bit of that. You mentioned mentors. I think it's so important for people to realize what mentors mean in our life, and the difference between being successful and have a fulfilling life and not, a lot of times can be, did you have mentors? What were the quality of the people who poured into you?
Yes.
Right? And then as you get that, you turn around and pour into other people.
Yes.
And so you had that, but then you got to Purdue and you stayed there.
Yeah, I know. Nobody does that.
Yeah, so tell me a little bit about that.
Dick completed his PhD and was ready for a full-time, kind of serious academic position. Okay. And we'd been at Ohio State a year on soft money. Okay. And then he had a 2-year position as director of guidance at the lab school at Ball State. Okay. And I had I was in the assistant to the personnel director at Ball State during that time. Had a ball. I knew everybody who was coming to Ball State.
Yeah.
I'd seen all the applications. It was just a perfect place for me to be. Enjoyed that very much. But then a position for Dick in the counseling and guidance area here opened, so we moved over. So I was a trailing spouse.
Yeah, it sounds
all that
like
time.
it. Were you as independent as you are? That kind of surprises me a little bit.
Well, that's what you did, and I would never ever do that again.
It worked out okay, but I could see why. Yeah, you'd look back and be like, "What was I doing?"
Right. This is what women are supposed to do, but I don't like this. I could have gotten nothing here. So
Right, but you did. You get something here.
yeah,
So
I had to work. I'm not happy, and nobody's happy around me if I'm not connected somehow. It's just really important. I heard, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that because none of the wives of other people in Dick's department worked.
okay.
So I was kind of branching out, doing something non-traditional for this crowd.
For sure.
But I heard that in the Dean of Women's office at Purdue, they had a placement service for women. Bingo. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. So I called and made an appointment, came over, and I met with Danita Stobaugh and explained to her what I was interested in. And Danita was most apologetic. She said, this is a placement service for Purdue women students. It's not for just any woman from outside to use the service.
Sure.
Because at that time, Kevin, the university placement service was only for men.
Okay.
Was only for male students.
Really? So it wasn't for all students?
It was for male students. So Helen Schliemann, knowing that every female student at Purdue was not interested only in getting married.
Right.
And wouldn't need placement service.
And that was the thought.
And that was
at that point.
Exactly.
Right? Interesting.
Yeah, this was mid-60s.
Yeah.
So Helen just designated one of her staff members to operate a placement service for women.
Okay.
To encourage women, one of the statements was, if you marry by the time you're 35, for the average woman, the central tendency, your last child, your youngest child is going to be in school at that point. So from 35 to whenever, what are you going to do with your life? So it was a placement service to help some of our women find jobs other than in home ec.
Yep. Yeah.
And to think about a longer lifespan.
Right. Even just helping them think through their future a little bit, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here I am in the wrong office. I can't pretend to be a Purdue student. So, Danita's apologizing because she can't help me. But on the way out of the office, she said, Betty, I think I heard recently that the psych department's looking for a director of the testing service. Thank you, Danita.
So you headed over there.
So, I made a call, interviewed, and was hired as the director of the testing service.
Okay.
And that was a really good place to be.
Yeah.
Graduate students in psych became the graduate assistants for that testing service. So I was working with about 20 graduate students in psychology, and our office became the kind of social center.
Yeah. Oh,
for
you had
that
to love
group.
that.
I did. We just,
Yeah.
you know, we got our work done and had a good time, and I think provided a real service to those grad students who came from thither and yon and needed a place to make friends and to feel like they belonged, and that was a good place. So I was there for about a year and a half, 2 years, and then had a call from the Dean of Women's office to interview.
And that's where you really met a lot of the women who mentored you and kind of grew up through the ranks.
Absolutely.
And I think there's been, I've known you for a long time, but I was also doing a little bit of, research ahead of time for this conversation. And there's been several times where you've been interviewed about your years as Dean of Students and about that time. I think that time in your life is pretty well known. And it was very impactful. I'd like to touch on a couple areas during that time, because I think in general, I think a lot of people do understand, if they know anything about you or about Purdue, know about some of your time there. But one of the areas that you have a passion for, and you've already talked about it, is women and the underserved. And during your time as Dean of Students, I believe it was when you were Dean of Students, that there was a lot happening in the area of students with disabilities. And my son Tay has cochlear implants and is deaf, and needs has needed services since we adopted him when he was 2, and has grown into he's been mainstreamed into school and all of the things that are there. But a lot of those have happened in a lot of the years before he ever went to school, right? And at Purdue, when the Disabilities Acts and some of those things that were happening and you were in that position, you really kind of went all in for Purdue in that area. Tell me a little bit about where that came from for you, where your heart for the underserved and the disadvantaged comes from, and a little bit about maybe what you're proud of regarding what you did in that area.
I had no training at all for this. I just happened to be assigned the staff position to be a contact for students who came to the university with a disability.
Okay.
And the person who'd been doing that previously, I'm protesting. How can I help students? I don't know anything about this.
Sure.
And her statement to me was, "Oh, Betty, don't worry about this. We only have 2 blind students."
Okay. So she was like, isn't that big of a deal?
Big deal.
Yeah.
Well, that was at the time when the Rehabilitation Act had been passed, which required, any college or university that receives federal funds to be accessible architecturally and programmatically.
You probably had your work cut out for you with the age of those buildings and a lot of that, right? I mean, that's,
So this was about 1975, 76.
Okay.
And Purdue had no inventory to know where its elevators were, where there were ramps, where there were bathrooms that were accessible.
Oh, really?
The university had never focused on that.
Never tracked it even.
No. And we had, at that time, the University of Illinois was the premier institution for working with people with disabilities.
Okay.
They started after World War II and had built that reputation. And Purdue wasn't particularly interested in that group. We were doing fine without that.
Sure.
So, with the Rehab Act, we had to begin to move on that. So for 2 or 3 years, I was on a half-time assignment with the Office of the President.
Okay.
And we were doing, just absolutely basic work, trying to figure out what kind of place is this and what can we do and where are our obstacles.
Yeah.
And while we were in that process, a student, Poorman, who'd been a freshman football player, that summer after his freshman year, was at summer camp as a counselor. A child threw a towel up into a tree, and the towel stuck up there, and Greg skinnied up the tree to get the towel. The limb broke, and Greg fell and became a paraplegic.
Oh, wow.
And this fellow loved Purdue and wanted to come back to Purdue. His family was scared for him to do that. So he, I think, had 1 year at IUPUI, and then was determined to come back. So, I met with his family and with him and with another student who's a wheelchair user, a graduate student, to talk with Greg about how he managed, how
he
Lance
navigates
managed.
the campus.
Right, and did he have a vehicle? And if so, how did the vehicle work? And how did you get it set up that way? Well, Greg was just a firecracker. He would not take no as an answer from his parents, that he needed to stay there and kind of be taken care of by them. No.
I'm going to have to figure this out.
I'll figure it out. And he was in a fraternity, and so he got his fraternity excited about this. So as a result of his efforts, his fraternity sponsored this program of curb cuts. And we worked with physical facilities, and we set up the map. So if you are the president of the Purdue Film Society, for $250, you could come over and pick where you wanted a curb cut. That would, in concrete, have the name of your organization impression in that curb cut. Sponsored by the Purdue Film Society.
And now people can roll right up through there.
That's right. So we sold to student organizations the initial set of curb cuts on the campus.
That is a great story. I did not know that.
And this was student run. It was Greg out there in his chair and his good friends from the fraternity. And they would go and speak at sororities and fraternities and whatever. And
got it done.
And these groups would get their money together and come over and pick a curb cut where they wanted their curb cut to be. We lost the last one of those. It was in front of the old, that area where the North Power Plant was. That's where the last curb cut disappeared when they created that beautiful mall. Have a picture of that. So, in many ways, it was students who put the pressure on and saw to it that Purdue moved on this. Students, along with people in the community, wanted to come to the Hall of Music. They'd been wanting to come to the Hall of Music forever. But if you're a wheelchair user,
couldn't get around.
Couldn't get there. So, we got a group from physical plant and some other areas, and they met with these students, and you just can't say no to students. Here are these students who, are just kind of driven to have something that's part of the normal student experience.
For everybody.
For everybody. So, physical facilities people can't say, no, I'm sorry, that's just too expensive. We cannot do that.
You're like, hey, we got to find a way.
We've got to find a way. So once they made that personal connection with these students, and they could call them by name, and they knew those students were going to come back and evaluate the plan and the implementation, then they had a team. So, it was just getting the right people together to get things done. The Hall of Music and Mackey Arena were the two premier spots. So we took out a row of, there's a cross aisle, about a third of the way back in the Hall of Music, and took out a row of seats just ahead of that aisle.
Yeah.
And then we invited students who were wheelchair users to come over and see how this was working.
That's awesome.
And so some parents came and the students, and so they came in through one of those side doors and rolled into these new kind of parking spaces. Oh, ups. They're at an angle.
Oh, no.
Gang, we've got to put in a platform here.
You're sitting like this the whole
That's
time.
Right, with your knees up against
the railing.
Yeah. And then they said, it would be, if we're going to come with somebody.
Yeah.
And it'd certainly be a lot more fun if they didn't have to sit in the back of the house.
Sure.
So then, we got to work with the ticket office to hold the seats in the permanent seats ahead of them, so that I, as a wheelchair user, can have my friend nearby. And what they'd been doing prior to that was, if I came in a wheelchair, then an usher would wheel me down. I would transfer out of my chair to one of the permanent seats. You would take my chair away.
Sure.
And I was stuck there.
Right.
I couldn't go to the restroom. I could not leave in case of fire. I had to wait till the whole house emptied before I could leave.
When you look back over it, that's just one moment, Betty, in this whole span of your career, and you look back at the impact that you've made and been a part of, right? As a team of people that were a part of those
absolute team
all the way along.
Yes.
But those kind of stories just kind of help bring home at the time, it probably seemed like small things that you were doing. You're just doing the next step, and it's like you're doing these meetings, and I'm sure it wasn't always very glamorous.
No, but I was fired up.
Yep, and that's what you're always fired up about things, and I think that you're still fired up about, which I want to get to, because through an amazing career at Purdue, you kept, one thing I want to touch on is you kept your energy, and I talked about this at the beginning, one of the more energetic people I know. You kept your energy up and your passion for excellence, I guess, is the way I would say it. Maybe on a different track from your career, just personally, what kind of things have you done over the years to take care of your body and your mind? Because you've stayed in good shape, you're sharp. As you've aged, you've continued to, be involved in a lot of different things, yes. Community groups, Purdue organizations, what are some of the steps that maybe you could share with me about, what you've done to be able to maintain that energy level and that sharpness?
Gosh, I wish I had something brilliant to say.
Maybe it's nothing in particular, but I'm sure there's some things you've done that could be transferred. Well,
I don't like to cook. Okay. I think that's one. So I'm not tempted to my therapy is not food.
Okay.
I eat to live unless it's a social gathering.
Sure.
And then if it's a social event, then, I'm all into preparing food and getting the right ambiance at the table
fun.
What keeps everybody there.
Yep.
That's just a whole different focus.
Yep. But day to day, that's not a focus.
It's you fix it and it's gone, and that's what is that. Kevin, I think for me, the driving force is curiosity.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
I want to know about what's going on. I want to know about people. Case in point, a friend gave me a pot holder about a week ago.
Okay.
And it's an ugly black pot holder. But it's sort of rubbery and quite substantial. And it came in a little plastic information bag with its name and some detail. And I'm reading all this little bitty print, and the stitching on this potholder is made of Kevlar.
Okay.
And I'm thinking, isn't that what bulletproof vests are made of? What is this?
Yeah.
Why do I have a potholder that has something in common with a bulletproof my cooking?
That's
so I realized I just didn't know anything about this Kevlar or whatever that is. So I'm in reading. You have to go to Google and find out.
Yeah.
What is this? And so what I learned is that is a DuPont product that was developed in the 1970s by a woman who made this product to substitute for, I think it was steel in racing tires.
Really?
Now, that's just interesting stuff.
And I would have gotten the black pot and I would have been like, that's not the best looking pot holder I've seen. I wouldn't have even probably read the writing on it.
Right. And it's so small, they're not inviting you to read it very carefully.
But look what you learned.
That's right.
See? That's awesome. Okay, well, and I think that you nailed it. I think part of what in a lot of our conversations over the years, I've seen that curiosity. You'll start conversations with, well, I was wondering why this is like this, right? You wonder why a lot. And I think that's one of the things I've really admired about you. And I've seen that in people that I do admire, is this level of curiosity, which is going to keep your mind a lot sharper, right? For longer.
For me.
Yeah, I think for any of us, right? If you really care about digging into some things and you're curious about it, your brain's always snapping.
Yes.
And firing.
Right. And keeps reminding me how little I know.
Sure.
And what remarkable things other people are doing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking now, that woman who discovered this in the 1970s. So I'm starting to worry about, okay, she would have gotten a lot of money for that. What did she do with that? Did she invest that well?
That's where your mind goes.
Absolutely.
See, I'm wondering, if she worked for DuPont, did she really get a lot of money for it? Or did she discover it within the purview of her job and they just kind of went and made money off of it?
Had she signed a disclaimer of some sort when she was hired?
Okay, I think you and I do have something in common. Yeah. No wonder we're friends. I think we both kind of think about that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And did somebody, it's like with athletes. Do they have the right advisor to help them use this opportunity? Because it may not come around again.
It's a small window.
It's a small window.
Yeah.
And how do you figure out whom you can trust? What vibes have you gotten from whomever that says this is a good person to work with? You're just reading about some of the athletes and what advantage people took of them.
Terrible.
Is just horrible.
As a financial advisor, it makes me sick.
I'm sure.
You're just like, oh man,
Yeah.
Because the window's so short and it's hard to make up for that, and it's just not fair.
Right. So, I think related to this discussion, so much of what you do is giving out those signals somehow that you're a person we can trust. That little statement, everything communicates.
Yeah.
Everything communicates. How do you dress, and what do your notes look like, and do you come prepared when we meet? All of those are ways that now I'm learning about you.
Right.
And sometimes I don't even know I'm doing that until I get to some juncture where there's a decision to be made, and I'm kind of testing the water. My mood ring, has to tell me, can I trust what he's saying?
How do I feel about this?
Yeah. Yeah, I do have an 8-ball over there. I check it periodically.
Oh man, I don't know if I trust that. Okay, so we're getting close on time. So I want to wrap up before we do a special segment where we'll kind of go and I think stand a little bit, and I'll kind of hit you rapid fire with a couple questions.
Okay. I have one little something I want to insert.
Okay, I think you'll like that. So real quick, give me a couple. A lot of times my clients struggle with how to know when it's time to retire. Okay, you had a very successful career. You didn't stop working after you retired. Mm-mm. You kept working. You just weren't getting paid for it.
Yeah.
But how did you make your retirement decision, and how far ahead of retiring were you thinking about post-retirement, and what kind of things you might want to do, or what kind of impact you wanted to make post-retirement? I would love for you to share a little bit about that.
My decision, I think, was affected by several things. One, when I'm working on something, I'm working, 110%.
Yep.
So I got to the point I was just tired.
Yeah.
I just felt like I'd been on duty 24 hours a day, calls from the police at night and whatever. So I was tired.
Sure.
And then looked at my family history. A nuclear family of 4, and I was the only one who had not had cancer. Both my father and my brother had colon cancer.
Okay.
And my mother had breast cancer. And my mother's incident was, she was in her early 70s, but the other 2 were in the mid-late 50s age. Yeah. So I'm thinking, I have to look at my DNA pattern.
Yeah. How much time do I have to be productive and do the things I want to do?
Yeah. Well, is this, if I die tomorrow, would I regret that I hadn't had more time that I could say yes to things and no to things?
Right. It's more for you. Yeah.
So health and and you can't know what that's going to be, and certainly I have outlived the odds of my family. I'm pleased to say, but I think a smart person must look at their family and draw conclusions, and whether you act on that or not, we need to be realistic about what could come, and I think being tired and family history were predominant for me. But I had to believe, there are a lot of things out there that aren't just happening on the Purdue campus.
Right.
But in fact, when I retired, as I walked out of the big banquet for retirees.
Okay. It had to be a little bit surreal.
Yeah, well, here we're in the North Ballroom, and it's all kind of candlelight, subdued lighting, and it's pretty, and Bob Ringel is making wonderful statements and all that stuff, and so it's goodbye time.
Yeah.
So I picked up my certificate and the gift, and I'm walking out of the North Ballroom, and a retired faculty member from the College of Agriculture comes over and says, "Betty, I wonder if you would think about being a member of the program committee for the Purdue retirees."
You're like, I haven't even retired yet. I'm like not even out of the door.
And
that's amazing.
I said, well, that kind of sounds interesting.
That's great.
Let me call you tomorrow. So, just nice opportunities came for me immediately, and I've just had lots of opportunities to do other things.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed them all.
And you have done a lot, and you've been involved with the retirees. You've been done so many other things. One of the things that you've done through that time is you've given a lot. You've been a giver when it comes to your time and also to your resources. And that's another decision that some of my clients struggle with is they wonder, how much, can I give, right? None of us want to run out of money before we die. That's kind of everybody's biggest concern.
Yeah.
But they want to be generous, but they also it's not nearly as impactful, I think, to us to have all of our money go somewhere after we're gone, right? Because we don't see the impact of it necessarily. So I know you've been pretty intentional about giving while you're here.
Yes.
And is there any specific criteria that you've kind of focused on, maybe just one or two criteria that you used as you've thought about where you would give and what organizations you would support?
Well, I think there are several filters I've used, and I don't know whether they're the best, but they have worked for me. I have to believe in the mission. It has to be really important to me. And with local groups, I need to know who's on the board.
Okay.
I want
That's
to
a good
know.
Criteria,
Whether I think those are people who are doing a good job with this and whether they care about it or whether they're just, this is something I need to do to fulfill my community obligation.
Sure, checking the box kind of.
Or this is where I'm going to meet the cool people.
Sure.
And there's some who are doing exactly that. So, I look at seriously at who the executive director is, what kind of board of directors they have. That's
really good advice.
I feel like I worked hard for this money, and I didn't do some things along the way, fun and frivolous. So if I'm going to give this money to X, I want you to take it as seriously as I have. I'm pretty careful about. If I'm going to pick all those dandelion heads, I want to know somebody's going to spend my money well. So that's a piece of it. And I think now I'm at maybe a little different point.
Okay.
I've given to a number of different groups that I think of more as to keep the lights on and the door open. The small amounts that have to be combined. So, is now a time to think about, instead of doing that more fractured giving, do something bigger.
More significant.
More significant, make a real change. I love knowing that some of the money in the community foundation account helped to create the bicentennial sculpture there at the west end of Main Street.
Sure.
I look at that and I think, well, maybe one of those little fins is mine.
It's mine,
I like being invited to some of the gatherings where the Community Foundation talks about grants they have given during the past year, and somebody from that organization talks about if they got some of the literacy endowment fund, the number of books that went to preschoolers this last year.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Those are life-changing gifts, a little book. So, I like knowing specifically what some of that investment does.
I think it'd be good if more people would, really dig into the places that they give and understand that too. So I appreciate how in so many areas you mentioned the term serious, right? I'm going to take it seriously. I think you've taken a lot of aspects of your life very seriously over the years, and it's led to a lot of success and a lot of impact. And I think, the terms, people throw in the word intentional around a lot. I think that you've lived your life with a lot of intentionality, and it's something that I've always admired.
Kind of fiercely sometimes.
Fiercely intentional, maybe. So both of those, that's great. So you said you had something you wanted to share, so I want to allow you to do that. And then we might pivot to this, just one little section where I hit you with a few questions. So.
Well, I think it's especially important for women to, well, as Helen Schliemann said, every woman needs a go to hell fund.
I like it.
Independent, her money.
Yep.
Because someday you may wake up and decide, I am not going to work with that supervisor one more day and be harassed by that
in this
individual.
Position. Yeah.
Right. I don't want to have no power. And maybe I've just lived with this man and been abused by this person. I'm not going to do that anymore.
Yep.
Well, I don't have options unless I have money.
Yeah.
And
that's great advice.
It's having money for the right reasons. And I think women just must do that. And, I've been around long enough that I was denied a credit card with my name on it. I could have one of Dick's cards if he approved that.
Really?
Absolutely. A downtown bank. I could not get a credit card with my name on it for a while. But then I had to kind of work at that. And then I could not have my salary counted when we wanted a mortgage to build the house, even though it was full-time, permanent position at Purdue.
They would only count Dick's.
They would only count Dick's salary.
That's incredible.
I had a little surgery at one of the hospitals, and the bill for that, the residual, was sent to Dick, even though I had said on admission, I have my own insurance policy. Mm-hmm. They sent it to Dick. And when I called about it, I was told, but he's the responsible person.
In the family, or in the...
And I said, you will not be paid until that bill comes to me, because the insurance is in my name.
Yeah.
So...
you've seen just this tremendous, it seems like a tremendous change over your lifetime in so many, feels like just really positive things that have happened, for women and the way that they're treated and the way that they're viewed. And I know there's room to go for sure.
Yes.
But wow, it's just, that's hard for me to even think about, those kind of things. When we were first married, starting out as a financial advisor, you hardly have any clients, right? You're just getting started. So I had no money. So our first house, or it might have been our car. I think it was our first house. They actually just said, you know what? You're going to get a better loan if we don't use your income and we just use Laura's. So by then it had flipped that far, right? Yeah. So she was the responsible one in the family.
Yeah, and when
that's crazy that happened.
It's an experience when I did go to buy my first car. We were living here.
Yeah.
And this would have been late 70s. And I said to the fellow that I'm going to pay for this by cashing in a little mutual fund that I had inherited from my mother. Uh-huh. So he knew. He had never seen Dick.
Yeah.
Dick had never been there when I was looking at the cars.
Sure.
And he'd heard me say, I'm going to pay for this with my mutual fund.
Yeah.
Well, I go over to pay, and Dick drove me over because I was going to drive this new car away. Right. And this fellow, we have to go to the back room and do all this kind of awful stuff. Yeah. And as soon as we walked in that little room, then he directed his conversation totally to Dick.
That probably wasn't the only time that happened.
I'm sure it was not.
Yeah, but that had to really stick in.
Right. I said I would never go back there again.
Yeah. So there's a car dealership and a bank that you're never going to use.
That's right.
Man.
Yes.
Was there anything else you wanted to share? I love that. I really appreciate some of your advice to women. I think that's really important, which is part of the reason I wanted to have you on this.
Yeah. I think women just have to have the power of some money that's their own.
Yeah. I love it.
Things just may not always be the way you think they're going to be today. And that thing I think I've said around you, nobody cares about your money the way you do.
Yep.
Nobody cares about your health the way you do.
Yep.
So, I think those are just basic responsibilities, and we have to be serious about those.
Yeah. Well, this has been a seriously great conversation. Thank you for your time. We've got just a few questions,
Okay.
and we're going to pivot over and kind of stand up and talk through that to get our bodies moving a little bit. And you're going to have 10 to 30 seconds to answer some of these questions.
Oh my gosh, I can't even say my name in that period of time.
We're going to move fast this time. So, but
and I shouldn't say get and fur.
Don't say that.
Okay.
All right. This is fun. Thank you. All right, so this is the hot seat part of the Journey video podcast with Betty Nelson, and but we're going to stand up because we've been sitting for a long time. So this is where
we have a hot seat.
Yes, this is hot. Right? Yes, we do. So this is a chance for me to ask Betty some kind of quick questions. She has to find a way to answer them relatively quickly. We're shooting for 10 to 30 seconds. And so kind of top of mind questions just to get to know her a little bit more here before we end. So,
Nice.
Okay. So Betty,
Yes.
First question, what is the favorite car you've ever owned?
Honda Accord.
And how long did you own it?
21 years.
I thought I knew the answer to that one. Okay.
And it got rear-ended, or I'd still have
But you'd still have it.
Yes.
Because you were so frustrated that you had to go get another car.
Yes. I love that car.
I remember that conversation.
Yes.
Okay. Best vacation. Where
Best
was
vacation. Ooh, I don't vacation very well.
it? Best trip.
Okay, best vacation, I think, was a cruise to Bermuda when I was in college with two cousins.
Oh, that sounds like a blast.
Yeah, it was British ship and lots of cool fellows, and it was fun.
Bet you had a good time.
I had a very good time.
That's awesome. Okay. Asian art.
Yes.
Tell me real quickly, when did that start for you? Even though I learned that you've never been to Japan, you've only been to Hong Kong once. So why Asian art?
It suits my style so well. It's clean, it's minimal, it's angular, it's tidy, and that's where I started my other life.
And it has a lot of nature,
Yes,
which you love.
I do.
Okay, that's awesome. Okay, so you're in your condo now. How long did you live in your home before you moved here?
Our home in the woods,
Yeah.
which we call home. We were there 50 plus years.
And what do you miss the most?
Oh, the nature. I think I'm really a girl of the Limberlost.
Mm-hmm.
I love the woods and roaming and the wildflowers and the animals, the kind of untidiness of the woods. I love the sounds of the woods.
Yeah.
You can think it's quiet, but there's squirrels, digging under the leaves and rattling, and they're birds, at different levels in the canopy.
Yeah.
I love that.
So the tidiness and the cleanness of the Asian art, along with a little bit of the messiness of nature,
Yes,
right?
right.
Yeah, that
Love
describes
that.
you. I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so one piece of advice that you would give to someone who wants to experience fulfillment and success in life, not just financial, not just vocational, but as a holistic life. What's one piece of advice you would give?
Be kinder and more generous than you have to be.
I love it. I can't think of a better place to stop than that. Betty, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure for me.
It's fun.
See, it's just a conversation, just like we always have.
Yeah, come back
And-
next week.
Yeah, we'll come back. Your kindness and your generosity has gone further than it would have to, but I think you've been repaid for that in multiple ways over your life. I've been able to see that, and it's a good lesson for me. So, thanks for your time.
And it feels good. I'm the beneficiary of that. I'm privileged to have more than I need.
Yeah, absolutely.
And So I get to enjoy the giving.
Yep. Yeah. It's a really cool thing to see in someone else. It's inspiring for a lot of other people. So thanks for all you've done, and thanks for sharing this with us. And maybe we'll have more conversations in the future with that.
Well, you helped me get some of that money I can give away.
Yeah, so let's give it.
Yeah. Doing all I can.
Awesome.
All I can.
Thanks.